very happy to be here this evening. And we were asked by Soren to speak on the power of connection, kindness, and compassion in the digital age. And first, I just want to be grateful to Soren, who I've known since we were both young. And he's a visionary and a friend, and at that time was running a project, many of them, but one, the Lineage Project for young men in prison and juvenile halls. And he's just been doing amazing work for decades, and now this is the fruit of Wisdom 2.0 for a long time. And then I'm really happy that I get to tag team with my beloved Trudy, and we get to teach together, which we often do, but tonight it's a pleasure. And following what Dan had to say, Wisdom 2.0 is really an exercise in kinship, in connection with one another, perhaps an exercise in love, where we stop what our ordinary life is and come and gather together. And yes, there's attention to the speakers and attention to the great ideas, such as Dan was just offering to us, but there's also attention to each other. As Albert Einstein said, at least according to Scientific American, it's not just an artifact of the internet, if you can drive safely while kissing someone, you're simply not giving the kiss the attention it deserves. So he understood what was coming for us as he saw many things. So let's just take a breath and be here for a moment. Let yourself soften, relax, and have a sense as you sit here, letting yourself breathe, that you're also interbreathing. Your body breathes itself, and it breathes the breath of all of those around you. You know, we're actually interbreathing with one another. And this breath that you take, which you can calm and relax with and become more present, dusted the tops of Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa and went through the lungs of the dolphins along the ocean. It also dusted Fukushima nuclear reactor. And it's important to understand as you breathe that we are breathing together because we're living together as an organism. And as Dan was pointing out, the separate sense of self, which is useful, you need to keep that. Ram Dass likes to put it this way: you have to remember your Buddha nature or your interconnection with all things, and you have to remember your social security number. So you need the separate sense of self. But you also know from when you are making love or walking in the high mountains or sitting with someone at the end of their life in that mysterious moment, or listening to an amazing piece of music in a cathedral, or taking sacred medicine, or giving birth, that who you are is not limited to this sense of separate self, the small self, that you are life itself moving through this human body. Now, as we come together at this Wisdom 2.0 conference, we are kind of in the center of the tech world. And yet, you all know intuitively, just as you know that you're connected with life with every breath, that no amount of technology is going to stop war, stop continuing racism, stop environmental destruction. All the nanotechnology, biotechnology, AI, all of that, it's just not going to do it. And this becomes a really pressing question on our hearts, and I know we all carry it, especially this week with the fate of the dreamers hanging in the balance. Hundreds of thousands of young people, with the shootings in Parkland and the tragedies of school shootings that weigh on our hearts. These are our children, with the divisiveness that's grown in the society. And so it's clear that the outer technology development must be matched and paired with the development of the human heart. Otherwise, we're sunk, basically. Because as you can see, it can be used, and as it is, to trigger the reptilian brain, your fears, to go to the worst place, and that's what sells things, to your grasping. It can take you over and bring the outer terror into the heart. But the point is not to let the terror come in. And fear isn't the end of the story. This from Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, your consciousness is like a piece of land planted with many different kinds of seeds. Seeds of joy, peace, mindfulness, understanding, and love. Seeds of craving, anger, fear, hate, and forgetfulness. These healthy and unhealthy seeds are always there sleeping in the soil of consciousness. The quality of your life depends on the seeds you water. If you water a seed of peace in your heart, peace will grow. When the seeds of happiness are watered, you will become happy. If the seed of anger is watered, you will become angry. The seeds that are watered frequently are those that grow strong. And so we as human beings have this choice. And if we step back and sense our mysterious human incarnation, it is made up of joy and sorrow, praise and blame, gain and loss, birth and death. Human incarnation, I don't know how you got in there, but there you are with this body, little bits of fur in certain places, some of it's missing, a hole in which you stuff dead plants and animals regularly and glug them down through the tube. You ambulate by falling one direction and catching yourself and falling the other. I mean, it's weird, this body, right? It is. Take a look. How did you get in there? But this is what you have. You have a human life. Your spirit came into this body. And in this is unbearable beauty and the ocean of tears. Human life will have also the truth of suffering. Anybody not have that? Raise your hand. You can have your money back. Okay. So the question for us as human beings is, how do you meet the measure of suffering that's given to you in your life? How do you touch it in yourself? I mean, take a moment and ask yourself, how do I touch the measure of struggle or sorrows that's given to me? With judgment or fear or anxiety, or with compassion? And how do you meet it with the rest of the world? Because we can contract in fear, or we can use the suffering that's part of our human incarnation to connect with one another. And one of the practices that I love when there are tragedies in the world, I think of Hurricane Harvey in Houston, is not just to look at the tragedy, but to see the helpers stream in. All those men and women in their airboats coming from Louisiana in the flooded waters to take people off the roof of their houses, in the earthquakes in various parts of the world. You see rescuers coming from all around the world with their dogs, with their helicopters, with their bare hands. So it's not just a story of suffering, but the real compassion is, how do we respond to it? And I think about my twin brother who died this past year, and it was difficult for me. As a twin, I felt it all so much in my body. And I spent a lot of time in the last 2 years with him in cancer treatment places, in Dana-Farber and other places. And sitting in there, chemotherapy and blood transfusions and so forth, I saw so many acts of tenderness. Not just the staff, which was beautiful, but here's an old man and his daughter coming in and holding his hand, or his wife of all those years, or partner, here's a child, and the members of the family come and gather around. And when there is suffering, there's also the opportunity to meet it with something that was born in you, which is the great heart of compassion. It is part of us. And compassion is different than empathy. Empathy is the first step of feeling with someone. If you see a bully on a playground and you see the kid being bullied, you feel empathetic. Oh, that poor kid. Compassion is the next step. Oh, I'm going to walk over to try to stop it, or I'll tell the teacher or the principal. Compassion is to see what's happening, to care, and then to do, to respond. And the heart wants to do it. This is the good news. The researchers at Yale of babies show that even babies, they turn toward and want to help people, or they want to support those who are helping others. That's the Yale students. At University of Chicago, they've got, and that's Paul Bloom's work, University of Chicago, Amy Bartell, her rats, that's the Chicago students, they will save chocolate chips for a rat that's been hurt or imprisoned in some way so that when it gets out, they'll share it, which is better than a lot of people's brothers and sisters when they were little, you know. But the truth is that this compassion is built into you, that it is part of who you are. And as I talk, while there's divisive trolling and bots, there are also a billion acts of kindness. And this can be fostered and awakened in not many moments, in not many weeks. The research at Stanford, the research of Liz Blackburn and Alyssa Epple, you know, of Nobel Prize winners in San Francisco on the telomeres shows that within 8 weeks of training in compassion and attention, you change the epigenetics, you change the length of the telomeres that protect your DNA. I'm recently with Trudy part of a group we're calling Open Source Compassion that's trying to wed compassion with the technological world. Scientists, contemplatives, technologists, VC. And we're talking about products, creating VR, AR, maybe a Fitbit for compassion. We're talking with the teams that are doing Siri and Alexa and Cortina and stuff to get them to compete to make a more compassionate device, because when you say to Siri, I'm lonely, what does she say? Or when you say, I'm depressed, I'm thinking of killing myself, and she says, would you like me to put on a piece of music? It's just not the right answer, you know? We have to connect in this way, and so we're looking at how to build a different interaction in the tech world. And the best thing is that it's built on the best tech of all, which is the power of the human heart. Soul force, unstoppable. It's not about a grim duty or some spiritual ideal or weakness. I saw it in my teacher, Gosananda, nominated for the Nobel Prize from Cambodia, who led people through the killing fields of Cambodia for 15 years, chanting, hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. And with every step, he said, we will come by the thousands and reclaim our land. And that's like the kids from Parkland, the young people, who right now feel unstoppable. You know, there's the great force of the culture. They are carrying us. They are the future. And we're here to support them. We're here to be with them, to make a community. So let's come together and envision and work to create a humane technology. And here are a few little things to keep in mind as practices as you consider it. Especially if someone around you is a little slow, or annoying, or too old, or too young, or unattractive, or attractive, you know, what are you going to do? Or difficult. Or uninteresting, you know, all these categories we make. So here's a few little practices for you. First, and you could even look around for a moment as I say these, see them as if they were the dearest member of your family. Look at somebody you don't know around you. That could have been your sister or brother or your uncle or your auntie. And when you see them, your beloved person, and when you see them as a family member, it changes everything. And if they're young, you might say, this could be Einstein. You know, this could be Marie Curie in there. This could be, you know, Nelson Mandela. Or if they're old, you could say, oh, that's my old grandmother who lived through so much. That's my old grandfather, my old uncle. So try looking around and seeing people as your family, which they are, by the way, just in case you didn't notice. And of course, the closest family is a little more difficult. You may note that both Jesus and Buddha had a hard time when they went home. So that's why they call it nuclear family, but all right. So that's your first practice. Second practice is to see the innocence as a child. Now look at a different person. Look around a little bit. And try to picture them at when they were young and innocent, having their best adventure as a young child. laughing, running, playing, and see the child of the spirit that's in that person. You can see it. Isn't that a nice way to look? You can practice these as we go through the week, these days. All right, here's another practice for you. You pick one, do them all. Pretend as you walk out tonight that you're the Dalai Lama. You know, who knows, maybe you are. But anyway, his attitude is, I want to meet everybody as an old friend. Old friend, old friend, old friend. Look around. You're the Dalai Lama, and then you offer blessings to her. And look to somebody else, offer them a little blessing. May you be safe and well. Offer your blessings. So that's a beautiful practice. Or you can sit here and set your best intention. You know, like Wangari Maathai, who won the Nobel Prize in Kenya, was thrown in prison, which apparently is part of the resume needed for Nobel Peace Prize, and planted some trees and got thrown in prison, and ended up planting 51 million trees with other people. With a kind of care and dedication, it wasn't alone, it was us. And the kids from Parkland, the young people from Parkland, they need us to hold hands with them. They need us all to plant those trees together. And so quiet yourself and ask, what is the deepest and best intention in my own heart that I can strengthen and empower by being with all these others here together? This is our task as a Sangha, to gather in the name of love, to gather in the name of what we care about, of life, both in the technological and in the most remarkable, mysterious tech of all of our own hearts. And so I'm so glad that we get to start in this way. And I have maybe a little practice before we end.
Thank you, Jack.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I could just listen to him the whole time, honestly. I don't ever get tired of hearing you. So I want to talk a little bit about unfiltered mindfulness and the whole elephant. There's an ancient story, and it appears in all spiritual traditions, so you've probably heard it, but it's about 6 people who are blind. They've never seen an elephant. They hear that there's an elephant visiting nearby, so they all go to see. But since they see through their hands, they touch the elephant. And one person touches the side and says, oh, an elephant is like a wall. And then one person touches the trunk and says, an elephant's like a snake. One person touches the tusk, it's a spear. The leg, it's a tree trunk. The tail, it's a rope. The ear, it's a fan. And then they start fighting with each other for the truth that they've experienced. They trust their perception. They felt it. It's true. So they're really going at it, and the wise woman who's witnessing all of this just calmly explains to them, you're all right. The elephant has all the features that you've named. You've each carried a part of the truth. And they're like, oh, okay. And they're happy because they're right. So for us, seeing the whole elephant, this is wisdom. Having the vast perspective, the whole picture, this is wisdom. And the content of wisdom is actually compassion. Just as Dan was saying, when we see the whole picture, what we see is our interconnectedness, our interbeing, how one of us leads to another, how we affect and how we do our life together. And this leads to, when we see this, we feel not separate, we care, we feel we are kin, and it leads to the opening of the heart and compassion. So each of us carries some piece of the truth through our unique perspectives, but we need each other. We need this community of wisdom that we're forming, beginning tonight. We really need each other to see the whole picture, because this whole elephant, we each have a part of it. And through mindfulness, which turns out to be a real superpower, through mindfulness, we can suffuse what we see with clarity and compassion. We can see the interrelatedness of each other and of our consciousness itself, where we can open our consciousness beyond our usual. It's pretty self-referential, kind of egocentric. We're always kind of on the lookout, what's going to help me, what's going to hurt me, what might enhance me, what might threaten me. When we see beyond our fixations on all of this, this is mindfulness. And technology is a superpower too, a superpower. And the potential for social media and for the digital world to bring us to better communication and understanding different points of view, it's magic, it's miraculous. But this is also, as Jack was saying, and we all feel it, it's a grave moment in our country. It's a grave moment for the youth in our country, for all the people who have been targeted and marginalized. And it may be those people, the people of color, the LGBTQI, all the people who have been on the margins, who may actually lead us, as the kids are doing now, for the good of our country and our planet. So without mindfulness and technology being wed, really being joined as we're doing here, the way it's designed is restricting. It narrows our view, and it does that with filters called filter bubbles. And those filter bubbles, they can narrow and polarize and silo us and make it just harder and harder to look at each other, to look at events, to look at what's happening with that wider lens, with unfiltered awareness, and with wisdom and compassion. The filter bubbles, it's kind of like looking at the vastness of this beautiful sky we had today here in San Francisco, the vastness of this sky through a straw, like that. And, well, here's the Wikipedia definition. A filter bubble is the restriction of a user's perspective, that's us, that can be created by personalized search technologies. A state it can lead to, a state of intellectual isolation that can result from personalized searches when a website algorithm selectively guesses what information you'd like to see, the user would like to see, based on information about you, such as your location, your past click history, click behavior, search history, and so forth. So we need filters to focus, just like we need to be able to focus in practicing mindfulness. We have to have some focus to be able to be mindful, to stay present with whatever the object of our attention is, the breath, listening, just feeling the body in your chair. We have to be able to focus long enough to learn something about what we're seeing, to have some insight about it. So we need these filters to focus what interests us, and the filters help us find what we're looking for. And it can be so boundless and exciting and fun to just explore online and explore this vast digital world. But after a while, when we've been on for a while, it gets harder and harder to disengage. And we start to feel maybe a little numb. And we begin a habit of what I'm now thinking of as stealing from ourselves. The second mindfulness training is not to steal, to accept what's given in our lives and be grateful and so forth. But when we are stealing our time by getting caught online, we're actually stealing the time we have to live fully alive, fully awake, and fully aware of this whole elephant, who we are and what's happening around us. And this isn't only about finding balance in our personal use of devices, but realizing that we actually all have a biological clock. It's not just young women. We have a biological clock that never stops ticking. And it's the biological clock of our mortality, what Dan is calling our melting wax. For me, it's keeping my heart open to the reality that death is real, that this body will be a corpse. It actually helps motivate me to set some limits. And I want to give a shout out right now, as I have been doing lately, to Tristan Harris. I don't know where you are, if you're here. For years, Tristan was a kind of lone voice crying in the wilderness, and now he has some great allies, and they've created the Humane Tech Group together. So I want to thank you for your work. I want to thank you for pointing out the deliberately addictive engineering that makes it really hard to set limits on our use of our devices. And I want to thank you for the immense work in helping us take control of our device use. It's really helped me personally to know this is not just my personal challenge or problem since the election. It's the addiction, it has been that at times, I admit it. I love technology. The addiction to what some people are calling our digital opioids, it's currently being fostered in all of us intentionally. And this is actually a big part of why we're here, not just to find our personal balance in using it, but how can we harness the superpowers of technology and mindfulness to bring more wisdom and compassion into the digital world. Years ago, Philip K. Dick predicted that in the future, the distinction that we now make between virtual reality or augmented reality and real reality will begin to seem completely quaint, like an odd, quaint thing. And it's already happening. We're reading about it, we're learning about it. Alexa can be everywhere. So when we were at this gathering, the open source compassion group that Jack was mentioning, Richie Davis talked about how in order to learn, we really need a community. And the example that he gave was, we are innately wired for goodness, and at least early in our lives, we will always choose a warm-hearted, good, kind interaction or relationship over an aggressive one. And that's just what we do. But just like to learn a language, we all have the innate capacity to learn a language. But we have to be in a community that speaks that language to learn it and for that language to survive. So that's why we're here, for us to learn the language of compassion and really make it our own, our default setting. It needs to be embedded in our families, in our schools, in our values, in our whole society. Because it's lonely otherwise. We really need each other. Dorothy Day said, "We have all known the long loneliness, and we've learned that the only solution is love, and that love comes with community." So here at Wisdom 2.0, for the next days, we are an intentional community. We're gathered with the passion and purpose it took to get ourselves to this conference. So may our purpose be love-driven. May our innate caring and kindness ignite what Pope Francis calls a revolution of tenderness in the world. may it spring from this felt sense of kinship for all life. So a friend of mine recently decided to get her DNA ancestry done. She wanted to know exactly how is she related to all life. And her name is Kathleen Mary Margaret Murphy. And so her DNA report came back 99% Irish. And she was very curious about that other 1%, which turned out to be Spanish. She can't figure out who it was. But I found this poem for her, and I want to share it with you. It's a poem by Fred Lamotte. My DNA ancestry results came in, just as I suspected. My great-great-grandfather was a monarch butterfly. Much of who I am is still wriggling under a stone. I'm part larva, but part hummingbird, too. There's dinosaur tar in my bone marrow. My golden hair sprang out of a meadow in Palestine. Genghis Khan is my fourth cousin, but I didn't get his dimples. My loins are loaded with banyan seeds from Sri Lanka, but I descended from Ravana, not Ram. My uncle is a mastodon. There are traces of white people in my saliva. 3.7 billion years ago, I swirled in golden dust, dreaming of a planet overgrown with lingams and yonis. More recently, say 60,000 BC, I walked on hairy paws across a land bridge from Botswana to Sweden. I am the bastard of the sun and moon. I can no longer hide my heritage of raindrops and cougar scat. I'm made of your grandmother's tears. You conquered the tribesmen of your own color, chained them together, marched them naked to the coast, and sold them to colonials from Savannah. I was that brother you sold. I was that slave trader. I was the chain. Admit it, you have wings vast and golden, like mine, like mine. You have sweat black and salty, like mine, like mine. You have secrets silently singing in your blood, like mine, like mine. Don't pretend the earth is not one family. Don't pretend we never hung from the same branch. And don't pretend that we don't ripen on each other's breath. Don't pretend that we didn't come here to forgive. So I'd like to do a very simple practice together now. It's a practice of what my dear friend George Mumford calls appreciative joy. And so I'd like you to turn to somebody and, maybe not the person you came with, if possible. Maybe, turn to somebody that you didn't already turn to when you were introducing yourselves before, if that's possible. And I'm going to offer these phrases to say to each other and see what it feels like to listen to this being said to you. Even though the person is repeating what they've been taught to say, just see how it feels. So the first phrase is, how wonderful you are in your being. I'm glad that you're here. You got that? How wonderful you are in your being. I'm glad that you're here. And the second one is, I take joy in your good fortune. May it continue. So, should we do them one by one? I think you started already. All right. All right, one by one. So the first one, how wonderful you are in your being. I'm glad that you are here. Just say it to each other. Ooh, I think you like this. So the second phrase, you did like that, didn't you? It felt good, didn't it? Yeah. Okay, the second one is, I take joy in your good fortune. May it continue. Go. Thank you, everybody.
So one more little practice to follow up on that beautiful poem and practice that you offered us, Trudy. And we might go over a few minutes, Soren, so get the hook ready. Let your eyes close gently for a moment again. Come back just to the presence of your own humanity and this own living, breathing organism that you inhabit. And bring in the quality of mindfulness, which we could call loving awareness, just here and now. This stillness is quite beautiful. And now to invite as well the quality of compassion. Think of someone you love a lot, that you care for very much, and remember, picture them in your mind's eye, imagine them as you can see them. And as you think of them, picture them, feel the care you have for them. And now let yourself also become aware of the measure of sorrows and the struggles or difficulties that are in their life as in every human life. They struggle with certain things. They have their fears and problems and difficulties and losses. And as you sense this, notice what happens in your heart, how it allows the great heart of compassion to start to blossom and open. The kind of care that comes because it's tender and you do care for them. How you would want to reach out and help them if you could. And know that this is our human lot, that you have your measure of difficulties. It's part of being a human being, of human incarnation. And they care for you in the same way that you might care for them. And now, keeping this tenderness that comes, let your eyes open gently. And one more time, with a sense of this compassion, look around and find someone who's sitting near you. Could be the same or a different person. And with this kind of tenderness, knowing as you look that they too have their struggles and measures of suffering, it's part of our human life. I want you to share two things with another person. First, to name one thing that's personally hard for you these days, because it's our willingness to speak in this way that allows our heart to open. And then the second thing to share is name one thing that gives you hope these days. And take a few minutes to do it before we close this part. Go ahead. Let yourself get quiet again just for a moment and sense how that feels to you to meet another person with honesty or vulnerability or presence and attention that you offered. This is really part of making community. This is who we are as a family. Feel that deep and beautiful sense that we can be here for one another. It is a revolutionary time. Don't be discouraged. Don't be defeated by it. This is a time when you are asked to water the seeds of goodness, to choose, even in these days, what seeds do you water? Connection, love, peacefulness, courage, dedication. And to let even the suffering, which is what awakens compassion, your own and those of others, to let it ennoble you, to join your spirit with those young people from Parkland, to join your spirit with the millions and millions around the world who have courage and compassion and want to make something beautiful. And we in the center of the tech world now have this charge given to us to make something really beautiful for the future. And you and I and Trudy, we are that family, and we can do this. Thank you.